So welcome everyone. Special meeting of Council, Tlangata Council Chambers, Wednesday the 1st of February. I'll ask everyone to be upstanding for our opening prayer. Almighty God, we thank you that you be present at this meeting to assist us in our service to the community through local government. We pray that our decision will be wise and taken with goodwill and clear conscience. Amen. Number 2, councillor and officer presence at the meeting. We have all councillors and our CEO, Director of Community and Planning and Director of Infrastructure and Environment. Apologies and granting of leaves. 3, nothing. Disclosure of conflict of interest. Did anyone have any conflicts to disclose? No conflicts. 5, land use. 5.1, application to amend a planning permit to allow for the conversion of a rural store to a dwelling. And I'll call on our Director of Community and Planning.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report is about an application we received to convert a rural store to a dwelling at 1922 Burrawee Road in Kuitong. As per the council policy, where the council officer is of a view that the permit should be refused, it's a requirement that this is referred to council for consideration. The application we've received is, as I said, based in 1922 Burrawee Road, Kuitong, and it is within the rural activity zone and bushfire management overlay. The site previously had a dwelling on it, and it was burnt down during a house fire prior to 2021. This means that no existing use rights are available for that site, just meaning even though there was a house formerly there, if it's not rebuilt within 2 years, those use rights expire. As part of the application assessment, we have raised a number of concerns in relation to the application. Specifically, these include the potential defendable space that's available from the house to the adjoining timber plantation, but of note is that the CFA have consented to the defendable space on the basis that they believe that taking the land on the other side of the property would effectively achieve defendable space, even though it can't be contained within the property. At this stage, there's been insufficient evidence provided as part of the application that the dwelling itself can meet a minimum of a bushfire attack level of 29. Just for those who may not be aware, the CFA are responsible for ascertaining the bushfire attack level, which looks at the risk of bushfire on a building, and then they require a certain standard. In this case, bushfire attack level is a very high standard required for a building, and so as such, without sufficient evidence that a rural store can be converted, we're of the view that that is a potential challenge to the application. The dwelling is also sited with 100 metres of an operational timber harvesting site. What this effectively means against state policy is that as the timber harvester may choose to harvest that operations, they will be prohibited from replanting the 100 metre defendable space to the dwelling if this permit was allowed. It is our view that to unnecessarily cause significant harm to the harvester is not a positive economic outcome, and we would be effectively limiting their use, their existing use, for the sake of this proposed development. The recommendation is that the application be refused on the basis of 2 grounds. The first is that insufficient evidence has been provided around the ability to adapt the existing rural store to become a dwelling to the bushfire minimum standard of a bushfire attack level of 29. And of note, this is particularly because the clauses under the bushfire management overlay require us to prioritise human life over every other aspect of development. We are of the view, unless this can be provided, we can't guarantee this. The second aspect is the siting of the dwelling with 100 metres of an operational timber harvesting will limit the harvester's operations, and our view is that their existing right should be preserved over a new right. The recommendation is as noted.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or clarification on that report? Councillor Wortman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just HVP, the owner of the plantation, I just want to make it clear, they will not allow their existing track as part of the defendable space for the dwelling.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, we referred this application to HVP, who are the adjoining neighbour, the timber plantation operator, and they did not consent to their land being used as defendable space. Nonetheless, CFA still are of the view that the space is defendable regardless of it being outside the property.
Thank you.
Councillor Dick Shane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note in the officer's report it says that this property is in a rural activity zone. A few months ago I received an email from the applicant where he'd had some communication with the planning officer stating the belief that he thought his land was zoned residential rural and that he was getting that off a rates notice. I just wanted to get clarification that that's actually not the case.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, rates notices do generate obviously a particular charging, and that there's particular categories, but they are completely separate from a zoning. He is in the rural activity zone.
Thank you.
So to be clear, sorry, you can have a residence, a dwelling in the rural activity zone. That's not a prohibited requirement, but you are required to seek a permit in this case, which is what's happened.
Anything further? No. Call on someone to move.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, could I just ask one more?
You just snuck in, yes?
I read in the report the application does not meet every aspect of the scheme, but that does not preclude it from being approved. Rather, all aspects of the scheme should be assessed to ascertain the best outcome for the community. And again, as a council, that's why we've got to weigh up, the safety aspects of, if we did pass a dwelling in that zone, Yeah.
Area.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's all I was on that.
So again, would someone like to move motion, please? Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation as presented and refuse the application.
Thanks, Councillor Wortman. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Anderson. Councillor Wortman, would you like to address the meeting?
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, as the report says, from my point of view, the key piece, the key point is the safety, and whether that the dwelling could be built to an bushfire attack level 29, and whether there's a safe distance from the plantation. I don't think that can be achieved.
Thanks, Councillor Wortman. Councillor Anderson, did you wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Are there any councillors against the motion? I'd like to put the motion then. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. I'll work our way down here. .2, Section 173 Agreement, PM and EJ Scammell and Townshire Council. Again, call on our Director of Community and Planning.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report is to obtain council approval to remove Section 173 agreement. The planning permit 2006-092 was issued in November 2006 to allow for a subdivision on 97 Springdale Road, Bethanga. At the time, the permit required a Section 173 be signed between the landowner and council to prevent future subdivision of the land whilst it remained in the same zone. At the time the permit was issued, the land was zoned rural farming, and the Section 173 was registered on title. The land was rezoned post that date to rural activity zone according to state policy, and the applicant has now approached us around potentially requesting that the 173 agreement be removed to facilitate boundary realignment between 96 Springdale Road, Pathanga, and 38 Talgano Road, Pathanga. Both properties are owned by the same landowner, and the realignment will not result in additional lots or further fragmentation of agricultural land. Under Section 178 of the Planning Environment Act, the responsible authority, and in your case council, are required to consider the following when ending an agreement. The first is the purpose of the agreement. The second is whether and why the agreement is no longer required. The third is whether the ending of the agreement would disadvantage any person, whether or not a party to the agreement. The fourth, the reasons why the responsible authority entered into the agreement. And the fifth, any relevant permit or other requirements the land is subject to under the Subdivision Act. This stage, our assessment is that all of these conditions can be met, and that none of the original rationale for having the Section 173, all of the original rationale for having the 173 agreement in place can be achieved with the removal of the Section 173 agreement.
Thank you.
Recommendation is as noted.
Any questions or clarification, councillors, on that report? Councillor Dick Shay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of the application, does the applicant have to disclose what the realignment will look like?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, technically no. So we do know what it looked like. It was one of the things that we tend to do as a planning team is ask people to provide the details so that we can foresee any challenges that might be possible. So my understanding is the team have spent a bit of time working with them on the best boundary realignment, and that would be, although it's a separate planning process, in effect we'd start by removing the 173, because without that 173 moving, we couldn't have moved forward with a boundary realignment. So yes, we're aware of what those plans are, but they're a separate process to the removal.
Right. So how big are the blocks of land involved here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd have to take that one on notice.
Thank you.
They're not small.
Councillor Walton, you had something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make it clear to everyone that we see that there was a zoning change from rural farming to rural activity zone, and that wasn't a council decision. That was a statewide decision. They were reviewing the planning scheme, because we do get requests to change zones, planning zones, and we have to. It's not an easy process. Like, we have to put forward an amendment to the planning scheme, and I just want people to realise that this was a state-initiated change.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Walton. Thanks. Anything further? Call someone to move motion. Councillor Dick Shay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation as presented.
Thanks, Councillor Dick Shay. Seconded, Councillor Scales. Councillor Dick Shay, would you like to speak
No,
to
thank
the...
you.
Councillor Scales?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief. This is just a common sense approach, I think, that'll fix up a small issue that's sort of cropped up just due to the changing of the planning zones. So, common sense approach, it's not going to have any impact. So, I'm more than happy for it to be removed.
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. (5.3) Section 173 agreement between OG and AE Johnston, Golden Murray Water and Town Shire Council. Again, call on our Director of Community and Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is for the approval to sign and seal a Section 173 agreement for 1518 Murray Valley Highway Corridor. The planning permit 2022-031.1 was issued on the 20th of October 2022, and condition 18 of the permit requires that prior to the building permit for the accommodation units being issued, the owner must enter into agreement with the responsible authority in Golden Murray Water, primarily to deal with the wastewater treatment on site and future possibilities in terms of management of the wastewater treatment. The recommendation is as noted.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification on that report, councillors? Someone like to move a motion? Councillor Dick Shay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that recommendation be as presented be adopted.
Thanks, Councillor Dick Shay. Councillor Walkman, a seconder. Or would you like to speak to that at all, Councillor Walkman?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Anyone against that motion? Would like to speak against it? We'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. 5.4, application to approve development plan for Tallangatta Estate. Again, I'll call on our Director of Community and Planning.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report is about a application for the approval of the development plan for the Tallangatta Estate. Just for the sake of everyone before we start, this is not a permit approval. It's purely an approval of a notional plan that a developer has presented. It doesn't give any approval for any building or works to commence, and that is something that is completely subject to a permit process that's quite a lengthy process and has a whole range of facets to it. The reason why a development plan is being presented is that under clause 43.04 development plan overlay, the responsible authority, and in this case council, is actually required to approve a development plan before a permit can be assessed. So at this stage, the developer has provided a development plan. There are a range of documentation that they are required under the development plan overlay to submit, and that is what forms the application and what has been assessed. And once again, it's not a planning permit, but it's a subsequent process. As part of the planning permit application, the development plan application, there are a range of aspects that we've needed to look at, particularly because of the nature of the site. The first is obviously the interface with Lake Hume itself and the importance of it as a waterway, and also to the surrounding properties, and particularly farmland to the east of the site. The impact on native vegetation, obviously, and there is also vegetation on the site that's not native that can be considered, but that's part of the planning process. Particular importance is the presence of a scar tree, and particularly from a cultural perspective, the retaining of that scar tree on that site. The layout and the connectivity of the roadwork, any recreational links, including pedestrian and bicycle links, and also the provision of public open space. As part of this development plan, we've also looked at a range of other aspects, particularly in relation to bushfire hazard and landscape assessments, stormwater management, and services, and sort of the road network itself, because all of them are future sort of strategic things that are important when considering a development. For the sake of explaining what the property is, it's the actual subject site's located on the fringe of Tallangatta Township, at the end of Towering Street, and is approximately 16.4 hectares in size. And it falls just slightly down towards Lake Hume, has two legal points of access at Towering Street East and Fisher Drive. The property itself is based in what we call a general residential zone, and so as a result, we wouldn't normally have a trigger for a development plan, but given that it sits also within a development plan overlay, that is why we've brought this matter to you today. And as part of that, we have looked at a range of what a development plan must describe, which includes the land to which it applies, the proposed use and development, and other requirements specified in the schedule of plan, which I've already talked about. We did receive some commentary as part of the development plan initially. Technically speaking, although people are able to comment, it was something that actually the developers initiated, and that information came back to us. So when we've looked at the plan, we've also looked at some of that commentary as part of the development plan. At this stage, we're of the view the development plan does meet all the requirements under the development plan overlay, and is able to offset the various risks that are associated with the site, particularly in relation to Lake Hume, and also bushfire risk, and also meets the high level, the strategic objectives around continuity with recreational aspects, road network, wastewater treatment, etc. The recommendation is as noted.
Thank you very much. Any questions or clarification on that report, councillors? Tim?
Happy to move a motion, Mr Mayor.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor Scales.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move that the development plan be approved and adopted subject to the following notations being included in the plan. This development plan expires in 10 years from the date of approval, and this development plan is conceptual and may be subject to minor change following further detailed design concerning stormwater treatment, provision of services, creation of access, and the need to, where appropriate, retain existing native vegetation. Any subsequent subdivision plan must be in accordance with the approved development plan.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wortman. Councillor Scales, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And it's definitely of my opinion that this is very exciting to see this finally at least get to the development plan stage. It's been on the cards for several years now, so it's exciting to see the developer moving forward. I think it's a reflection on what has occurred over the past 10 to 12 years with the redevelopment of Tallangatta, and it's really showing that people wanting to come and live here now, that it's got to the stage that a developer wants to put a larger development in. And so we're just going to see an increase in our population into the future, which is very exciting, increase in ratepayers, of course. It will, of course, put a bit of extended pressure on some of the facilities and that we may have in Tallangatta, so that's probably something we need to be mindful when we get around to the planning permit stage. So thank you very much, and once again, very excited and very happy that I was able to move it.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. Councillor Wortman.
Thank you, Mr
Seconder,
Mayor.
would you like to speak?
I'd just like to back up everything that Councillor Scales said. As we know, Tallangatta has been landlocked for a number of years, and there's always been the talk of extending the town, and this subdivision creates that opportunity. If it goes ahead, of course, it will bring families and increase business within the town, and it's again, as Councillor Scales said, there's a lot of water to go on the bridge yet through the planning permit stage, but it is a very exciting project. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Councillor Wortman. Any councillor wish to speak against the motion? No? Well, put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Is that it? Oh, that was a long one.
6.
And item 6, council policies. 6.1, policies for review and adoption. Call on our CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillors, presenting for you just a slight amendment to the procurement policy, and I'll bring your attention to page 10. 3.7 is the section that I'm referring to, where we have now included that procedural exemptions must be approved by the CEO, and where the value of a procedural exemption exceeds the CEO's delegation, it must be approved by the council. All approved procedural exemptions must be recorded on council's records management system and reported to the Audit and Risk Committee. And that is the only amendment that we're proposing today. Put that before you for consideration.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification? Someone like to move motion? Councillor Dickshay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that recommendation as presented be adopted.
Thanks, Councillor Dickshay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wortman. Councillor Dickshay, do you wish to speak to that?
It just makes sense, Mr Mayor, that in those exceptional circumstances where the amount of the procurement is excessive, that it does come to council to approve it.
Councillor Wortman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This policy we reviewed and extensively reviewed, and but you can always improve. And this minor changes, I totally agree with.
Anyone? Thanks, Councillor Waltman. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. 7, Environmental Sustainability, and 7.1, Environmental Sustainability Report. And I'll call on our Director of Infrastructure and Environment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report provides information on the management of leachate at the Corryong landfill and seeks approval for the variation of the contract, contract number 2122-114, to the value of $230,000 excluding GST, to enable the removal of leachate that is accumulating both in the landfill cells and in the leachate dam in order to ensure compliance with EPA requirements. And the recommendation is as presented.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification on that report, councillors? No. Would someone like to move recommendation, move motion? Councillor Waltman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation as presented with an additional point. That a report on the cost of operating the Corryong landfill and the future viability of operating the facility and possible alternatives that could be considered. Yes, thank you, Councillor Dickshaw.
Got that one? Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Scales. Councillor Waltman, would you like to speak to that motion?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, we know it's been a wet couple of years, and we've got a problem with the leachate, which we've got to rectify. But I'm really looking forward to the report of look at the future of the landfill. Thank you.
Councillor Scales.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Fully endorse what Councillor Waltman said there. Obviously, it's an issue that's got to be fixed, or at least maintained at the moment, fixed into the future, and really looking at the future cost of the landfill as it's costing more and more in compliance each year. I think it's very important to really weigh options up on whether we need to continue to have a landfill that we maintain, or whether we're outsourcing our waste. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scales. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? No. Then I'd like to put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. I think that might be it. So thank you very much.